Welcome to another episode of Late Nights with Dr.G. You have questions, I have answers. Well, in this episode, we're going to get down to RFK. That's right, the Secretary of the Department of Health and Human Services. You know, he just went on some Senate hearings, and so there were some issues with that, both pros and cons. But we're going to kind of delve deeper into that, and I'll give you a perspective, a more of a physician's perspective on that. So let's get into that. Hey guys, I'm Dr. George Armendariz.
What is going on with vaccines? They're rolling back some things that statements that were previously said, and just going on with RFK Jr. So can you explain a little bit about that situation?
Well, okay, so he had some Senate hearings in September 4th, yesterday actually, and man, you had a bipartisan congressional hearing where they were kind of drilling him.
Yeah.
You know, some of the things I agreed with what they said to him, but then some of the other things, if you look at any of the evaluation of what the media is saying, and I just don't necessarily agree with it. And I'll tell you that why throughout the podcast on why I don't necessarily agree with everything that they're saying. Now, granted, it all came down to vaccines, mainly the COVID vaccine, but also all vaccines. So delving into those specific Senate hearings, it mainly focused on vaccines. That's what the majority of the whole thing was about. And then also what was reported, what he reported or his team reported versus what was reported by the CDC on the VAERS report. The VAERS is the vaccine adverse event system that they utilize. Now, granted, it's funny. They have this vaccine adverse event protocol or evaluation system that when he used it, and this is one thing I don't like about it, when he used it and mentioned it, they were like, well, that's just because anybody can post anything on that. It's a public kind of a reporting system. Okay. And so they said, these haven't been, totally, they can't guarantee that it was because of the vaccine is what the adverse event was from. Okay. So, and I get that. But everything comes back up to the old adage, there's accounting, there's bad accounting, and then there's statistics. Mm-hmm. And what that means is that numbers can be manipulated, okay? Now, they're saying that he's manipulating them, and I don't think he is. Now, maybe he's not addressing them correctly, and he's utilizing information, maybe it's old information to his, bias to him or how he feels or his group feels. But either way, that's why I have issues with the CDC and the FDA as a physician, because if it benefits them, well, you damn right they're going to say, oh, this is great. This is good stuff. You got to follow this. This is great. But if it doesn't benefit them or their views, then they're going to say, well, they're going to question it. So which is it? And so that's my problem. That being said, this is the thing about vaccines. We've been dealing with vaccines and I've had, all my childhood vaccines, all that stuff. Now, granted, there wasn't the HPV vaccine. There wasn't certain vaccines around when I was little. But I had all my vaccines. Hasn't been any issues. Now, granted, this is a historical type of thing when you're talking about vaccines because we've had them around for so long, and that's how smallpox was eradicated. And so when you think of measles, that's the MMR, measles, mumps, rubella. Those are important. Those are highly contagious type of diseases that you don't want the general public to have. And so I think those vaccines are important. Same thing when it comes down to DPT, diphtheria, pertussis, tetanus. Those are particular diseases that an individual is not vaccinated from. Usually it happens to happen when they're little, usually before they're 2 years of age. You're going to have some issues because they're just the contagious aspect of it is very, very important to the general public. And so he fired all 17 members of the accessory committee that evaluates. They're kind of like a third-party committee that evaluates all vaccines. And they're all specialists or professionals, usually in infectious disease, that evaluate all of these different protocols and says, this is good or this isn't good, depending on what they're talking about in dealing with the vaccines. And he fired all of them. Mm-hmm. Now, the media wants you to believe that he fired all of them and he only put the people that feel the same way he feels. And so there's bias on that sense. And maybe he did do that to some extent. But then again, some of the other people that were there, they've been there for years of that 17-member committee. Those guys have been around, and are kind of like, well, I don't know if they're just agreeing to agree. Yeah, they back it up with evidence. But once again, I go back to statistics can be manipulated. And so numbers can be manipulated. And now maybe that's a conspiracy theory, and that's my own thought about that. And, I do think that evidence should be strong and, randomized, placebo controlled. And they keep going back and forth because you even had in the Senate hearings, you even had Republican. Okay, so it was bipartisan. Republican senators, which happened to be Cassidy. I can't remember the other guy in Bartolome or something like that. One's a GI doctor and one's an OBGYN and the other is an orthopedic surgeon. So they know about taking care of patients. Now, granted, they're not in infectious disease, and so they're not really that knowledgeable about vaccines except what they read, like all of us, But they are physicians that take care of patients, and so they see that, critical. And so because he's in charge, I like the fact that he's questioning certain things because we don't want to stay the status quo because you're never going to grow if you maintain the status quo and just, one of the worst phrases in the world was, well, we've always done it this way. Well, that's not necessarily a good answer. Sometimes you have to change because times are changing. Now there's AI, now there's newer treatments, and so, things change. And so the group needs to change. Now, if the individuals aren't changing, then those individuals need to be moved because these are non-elected individuals. These are appointed. They're not elected. And so that's a big difference. Okay. So it's not the general public that are electing these people. It's the biased partisan group, whoever's in charge, whether they're Democratic or Republican, they're the ones that are putting these people in their particular positions.
Do you think there should be some sort of democratic process for those positions?
Yeah, and they say there is, but I don't think so because they get appointed, and whatever the administration is at that time, they get appointed. Now, granted, this particular committee had been through Democratic and Republican type administrations. And so they were bipartisan in quotes, but I do think that we're in a landscape, at least with healthcare, that is just changing damn near by the month, and it's crazy. And how we treat people today is maybe in 2 or 3 years, we're not going to treat them that. We're going to have different medications, different drugs, different protocols and procedures on how we treat a particular ailment, depending on what that may be. And so I think that things need to be evaluated probably on a yearly basis because things are just changing. I want to say that AI is going to make this somewhat better because it should be non-biased, but it's already been proven that AI is biased. Mm-hmm. And we've talked about that before, but man, you can just look at it. It is biased according to the people that are asking the prompts. And that's just how it's built. I think there has to be better safeguards in that, especially when you're talking about healthcare and public policy. And, as a physician, everybody can say, you're a physician, you want to help the general public, and absolutely want to help the general public, but I don't like it when things are manipulated. Okay. And so I want to make sure that the evidence that we have, because we need evidence, and some of the things that RFK talks about, that evidence, I'm like, I don't know if he's listening to the right people tell him that. Mm-hmm. Maybe they're just yes men, on that side. And trust me, I veer more on the right than I do to the left. But that being said, that's my bias.
What's the main controversy that's going on right now? Is it mainly that they want to remove a lot of vaccines that for children that are typically considered like the standard, required vaccines?
Yeah, you're exactly right. And and because of that, people are talking about, well, look at the measles.
The new outbreak that
the outbreak coming up. You're like, well, that's under your watch. What are you doing about it? And
that was like the first one in many years.
And I agree with that because the measles vaccine has been around for decades. And I think we need to continue that. Where I think he went a little array, and this is just my opinion on this, is that he's going after every kind of vaccine. Now, I do think that you have to have all this stuff evaluated because times change and, treatments change and so forth. But these are tried and true vaccines.
Yeah.
But when you're talking about the COVID vaccine, that's the main issue. And true, I'll tell you right now, I didn't get the COVID vaccine, but I didn't think I needed it. Now, granted, I'm over 50, but I still don't think I should be mandated to take that. Now, if I so choose to, I think I should be able to take it. But if I don't want to, I think I should be. And then you said, well, you're going to get other people sick. And I said, I don't agree with that, because the people that get sick, some of them are immunocompromised, and they definitely need. Some of them are really, really old and fragile. They probably do need it as well, But then to have us be, so many people, and what you see it from when this happened in 2020, people were dying by themselves because they thought, oh yeah, we have to separate everybody. Well, I get that, but that's cruel and unusual punishment for these people that passed away. Bottom line is they didn't want us to go outside as an example. And I think the sun, we have to have the sun. And I think the sun helped in healing, But I do think the vaccine is a good thing, but only for certain people. And it just shouldn't be mandated that you have to take it. Okay. And I think that I don't care what anybody says, everything is being biased or manipulated according to whatever your beliefs are. And that's the issue. And these are all political beliefs.
But when it comes to children, that's also a totally different topic.
It is a totally.
You have other kids that are all going to school, required to go to school together. And a lot of parents would be concerned that their child could be near another unvaccinated
And I get
child.
that. And that's why, I wish there, unfortunately, he's lacking in this leadership, because he's
not a
getting rid of
one-size-fits-all,
He's getting rid of everybody. When you see so much turmoil, there's no consistency, and people need consistency as a general public. And so I'm all for making changes. And just because I feel my opinion on certain things for me and my family doesn't mean that people follow that. And that's okay. And you need to do but you can't say, oh, well, you're going to make me sick because you're not getting it. Well, I don't think so, because you're the one with all the chronic health problems. I don't have any health problems. I'm healthy. I try to eat right. I try to get exercise. I try to do the right things. And this goes back to preventive medicine and regenerative medicine. You have to prep the body and prepare it to be able to handle any type of issue. And by doing that, it has to come down to the immune system. The immune system is the key to everything when you're talking about the human body. It really is. And, even back in the early 80s, we didn't understand the immune system that well until HIV came out and the AIDS epidemic. And then they really started studying it, and they've made some huge strides in it. And they figured out, well, gosh, man, this thing does a lot of crazy stuff, and different treatments have now been mandated and developed for different diseases because of studying the immune system. And so the immune system is super important for anything that you do. And so it all goes back to that. And one thing that he's trying to do, and God bless him. I don't know if he's doing it the right way, but he's trying to make the food healthier. He's trying to get rid of these dyes, as an example. He's trying to put more whole food type diets out there. And you know what? You should. Unfortunately, and we've talked about this before, there's different policies in place and subsidized programs that pay for all this questionable stuff that is processed foods or just not that good for you. And so that's an issue. And so, yes, I do think it's good that you question everything, but no, I don't agree with, firing everybody and just putting in yes men in place. That's not the right way of doing things. It has to be more evidence-based, and it has to be more independence. And independence by thought. I don't mean it has to have zero political affiliations on either side. I mean, if you're going to be a third party in evaluating something so that you can give a non-biased evaluation, it has to just be that. But unfortunately nowadays, I think everybody's biased in some regard, whether it's more right or more left. And so that's a problem. And so all I can say is maybe you get an equal amount of people that are pushing toward the left and some that are pushing toward the right, and hopefully they can come up with a valuable evaluation that's more non-biased. But then again, then you go back into the political arena because nothing ever gets done.
Well, do you think that part of this is also kind of a political theater of RFK trying to be like a tough guy in front of Trump?
Maybe. I mean, who knows? I don't know. I mean, that's a part of it, you know?
Because I wonder how many people around Trump are just acting like Trump. Just to appease
trying to be bullies, and that's not the right way of going about it. I do like throwing a wrench into Washington, mainly because I think it's filled with people that don't really have the best interest. They say they have the best interest, but for somebody that, you know, whatever they make, $142,000 a year.
170,
and these people come out multi-millionaires. That's kind of interesting. And I know there's some laws that they're trying to enact to not allow them to invest because they have all the information in front of for different companies, you know, and different committees they are part of. And so, yeah, they can make a lot of money doing that. That's illegal. I don't care any way you spin it because the general public, we can't have any of that.
Trading.
It's insider trading. Okay, that's one thing. But what I believe that we should do, and which they'll never agree to it, is term limits. The president has term limits.
Yeah.
And why is Congress? You have congressional positions that people
like
have held for like 40, 50, 60 years.
Pelosi and those.
And an 80-year-old versus a 30-year-old, they're going to see things differently. And now some things I might agree with the 80-year-old, but then I'm also going to agree with the 30-year-old too. Either way, the term limit should be 12 years. That's what I think. I think 12. If you can't do what you want to do within 12 years, then you need to let it go.
Yeah.
But the lobbying groups are huge in Washington. And then you talk about oil and gas, you talk about big pharma, you talk about all these. They have all the money in the world to put forth for lobbying groups that will, you know, kind of push people to do certain things.
Yeah.
And how they do that is, you know, I'm not saying they're being bribed. I'm just saying that they're being offered things that I don't know about. And they vote on something. They vote on something a certain way. And I'm sad. It's sad that I believe that, but I do. I just don't think that you know most
I think
people
most
in Congress
people agree though that I think that's a common.
I know, and I think the general public agrees. They're like
the general public is pretty fed up, but how do we change it is a real question.
That's the thing. But see, you have to throw a wrench in it, and that's why I think somebody like Trump or somebody like RFK is a good thing. Unfortunately, these aren't politicians. And so sometimes if you're going to be in politics, you got to kind of be political. So you got to know when to fold them and know when to run. You know, you got to know how to talk to people, at least in some form. And everybody should be more genuine in the sense that they should understand some people know a lot about a particular subject and some people don't. But you can't reprimand somebody just because they don't, just because their opinion is different than yours. You know, you might know more, and that's great, but that doesn't mean they're wrong. That just means from the information that they have, that's how they view whatever you're talking about. Florida, you know, stopping all mandates.
Yeah.
And that's what the Trump administration they want each state to kind of take control of their state and you know, make those decisions. He wants to not have as many federal mandates. If the state has that, then that's the state's prerogative to do that. And I think some of that's good, but I don't think all of it's good. Now, Florida is interesting because I do like some of the rules that they have for regenerative medicine and stem cell therapies. Okay, I think it's great, and I hope more states, because that's really the only state that allows you to utilize certain treatments and procedures that we cannot do in the United States or definitely in other states. That being said, when you take away mandates for vaccines, you open up the door to people to have any little issue with a particular vaccine, and they don't want their kids to have it. And I get that, but they still have to go to school, and you're going to be young kids, and you know how kids spread germs. The potential for having an outbreak of something is going to, you know, it goes much higher. And so I think that for certain vaccines like the MMR, DPT, and things of that nature, even the HPV is, we didn't have that when I was growing up, and we didn't have the chickenpox vaccine. Okay. I think that's a good thing, mainly because HPV, one, they won't get these particular ailments as they become teenagers and adults. That's one. But more importantly, these particular viruses have been found. plenty of evidence and studies that show that they cause certain cancers. And so if you can't get the virus because of your immune system, now you took a vaccine and the immune system now recognizes that and treats it immediately, then you can kind of count those cancers out because you probably aren't going to get those. You just wouldn't. And I think that's a good thing. And so to not be able to mandate that, it's a slippery slope.
Yeah.
I think some of them, people need to do that, especially with the MMR as an example, or the DPT shot. People go on, well, it has mercury, it has thimerosal, but and those are two types of preserving agents inside there that have been shown to cause a lot of problems. And then RFK brought in that autism and certain neurodevelopmental issues are because of these vaccines. Maybe they are, maybe they're not. The studies aren't that strong that they are. Some studies say that they may have some correlation, but there's just not enough stuff out there that shows us that, okay, yeah, that definitely caused that. Now, they've now changed how they preserve most vaccines, and so little, if any, thimerosal or mercury is in any of these vaccines in the first place.
Right.
So people need to know that. But if he's saying that, now it's putting a thought in somebody's head, going, oh, well, I'm not going to have my kid take this, and I don't think that's a good thing.
So what's the comparison of like the amount that would be in that vaccine versus like the amount that you would get in like your standard can of tuna, like eating tuna?
You know what? I don't know the exact numbers to that, but any amount, some researchers or scientists say that any amount can be problematic because you have a developing baby in there, because they're talking about for pregnant women mainly. To kids or babies and pregnant women. And so he blocked all that. So there's no mandates, or at least federal mandates for that.
Because if you were going to regulate food and vaccines, you'd also have to look at the number of
it's like a parts per million. Yeah.
In the food as well, right? You can't just say only for vaccines.
And this is important, but this is the thing. You see all these biohackers, and man, I agree with them. What they have to say is great. Don't utilize seed oils, get your sunlight, get red light if you can, do cold or heat therapy. I mean, the list goes on. But this is the thing. There's not a lot of very specific studies out there that shows these are so good. There are studies that show red light's good for you, but when you're talking about all of this stuff, you can make claims for everything. And anecdotally, it's good. It's good for you. Like I do all those things, as much as I possibly can. But people need to realize what they need is good whole foods and exercise and sunlight. That's what you need. That right there. And then, meditation, because everybody's stressed about everything. And so, you can't be as stressed, but that's not realistic, because the how the world is now is just a stressful environment. Whether you're in the United States or you're just looking things going on in the world today, and kids stress about different things that when I was a kid in the 70s and 80s, God, it was a much simpler time. And man, I wish we had that back then, because guess what? We didn't have phones, and you went out and played. You came back when it was dark.
Yeah. That
was awesome. Now everybody knows where everybody is at any time. And that's good, but is it good? Sometimes no, I don't think so. You're always going to have proponents for one side versus opponents for another side of it. So it's difficult. You can say the sky is blue, and somebody's going to say, no, the sky is clear. It's just reflecting the blue from the ocean. Who knows? I don't know.
So when it comes to I guess the current administration and with RFK, what do you like that he is doing? Like, what do you like that he's been able to get done so far?
I like it that he's making us question everything. We're not just keeping things status quo like it's been done. I don't like the fact that they made us, during COVID, they made us stay inside. I didn't stay inside. I went out and got fresh air. But they wanted us to stay. Where did the 6 foot apart from each other? Where the masks? Where did all this come from? Where's the science behind that? There was no science. It's just like, well, it looks like that would work.
Actually, did you hear about that? The military is getting back pay now for anybody who was discharged dishonorably discharged during
because they didn't either take the shot or and I agree with that.
They're getting checks for like $300,000, $400,000 now.
Yeah, that's a lot. I didn't have that opportunity. I wish I had that opportunity. But
you were in the military though, right?
I was in the military, but this was a long time ago when I was in the military, unfortunately. Yeah, I think that's good. Trust me, when anything is tested, unfortunately, whether people want to believe it or not, it's tested in the military. Everything. If you look up anything, new vaccines, new treatments, everything is always tested with the DOD. It just is. Why? Because soldiers can't say no. They have to do whatever whatever they say. And I think that's a good thing in certain regards, but it's a bad thing in others, because who are the test subjects? They are. Whether they know it or not, they are. And because everything is based in the military. The military tests everything. That's what I think he's doing good. It's putting question in to say, why are we staying the status quo? We can't stay the status quo. Everything has to evolve. Everything has to evolve. AI is evolving. By the day, it looks as though we should evolve too. There's studies out showing how dogs are evolving, and getting smarter, because the bond between a human and a dog is just so much more than it was even 20 years ago. Everything has to change, and you can't keep everything the same. Now, I do think that certain vaccines need to stay the same. But then again, if you can have a better vaccine, why wouldn't you? But then again, you have to have proper protocols in place that those are being tested properly. That was not the case with the COVID vaccine. I don't care what anybody says. It was not the case. There was always questions behind that because they had to rush it. And I get why they had to rush it, but you can't say that it's so safe, because there's people but this is the thing. There's always going to be collateral damage in anything.
But they've also maintained using it like a yearly flu shot. They have it available for everybody.
Yeah.
Versus every other vaccine that's been way more studied. So why are they still administrating it year after year instead of repealing it?
Well, the fact of the matter is that the flu vaccines only cover maybe 10 different strains of flu. Some of them probably cover less than that, but let's give it the benefit of the doubt, saying 10 different strains. If you come in contact with a flu virus that is not one of those strains, you're going to get the flu. Ironically, I don't get it every year, but the years that I have gotten a flu shot, miraculously, I get the flu, which is weird. And when I don't get the flu shot, I don't get the flu. Now, that's probably more coincidence than anything else. But the fact of the matter is that there are certain preservatives, like I mentioned before, with the flu vaccine is one of those vaccines that people have issues with. And I get it. But I don't think that these things need to be mandated, because it's been shown that the flu, although people die every year from the flu, but most of those people are very old, that they get, they're very old or have immune issues or immunocompromised because of cancer or because of whatever, and they get the flu and then they die. And it sucks. I think that should be a choice of everybody. But then again, once again, there's no mandates, or there's no there's no mandates, or there's no protocols for supplements. Like any supplement out there, anybody can put that out and say, oh, it does this, it has this in there, and it's great, and there is nobody, FDA can't watch that. And so we've talked about that before. I don't like the FDA in a lot of regards, but that's mostly when it comes to insurance and how our hands are tied at things we can do. But also, I would like them to have some type of evaluation of supplements, because there's so many supplements that come into the market that a lot of them, and I would venture to say greater than 70% of them don't do a damn thing. Some of them are awesome, and I've tried some that I'm like, wow, those are great. And then some of them I try, I'm like, I don't think this does anything except make me have less money in my account.
Yeah,
or
a lot of fillers. Yeah,
there's a lot of fillers. So is there, do I have the answer? I don't. And so, but I don't think you can, you can't blame a lot of people like RFA, in which everybody's blaming him for every little thing, in which certain things you can blame him for, but you can't blame him for at least trying to have a discussion of, look, we got to look into these things, because we've been doing this thing like this for, years and years and decades, and people are still getting sicker and sicker.
So you'd say in general, as a doctor, you kind of like more of what RFK is doing more than what you don't like.
Yeah, I think so. I don't like necessarily how he's doing it. I definitely wouldn't have fired every one of those people. Maybe half of them. Like I said, I'm not privileged to that information, and so I don't know exactly, what was his issue with each of those 17 people, because some of them were very, very intelligent people that really knew what they were talking about. And I think it's good to have people that are biased on one side and biased on the other, because you have to have
dialogue.
You have to have dialogue on. They may see something in a different way that you don't see it, and it could bring up a question there. You're like, you know what? That's a valid question about that. Perception is reality. So your perception of what you think versus somebody else, it's going to be different. It's going to be different. And so I wish he didn't do that. What I do think he's doing good, in which I'm following him, is the Maha movement, at least the general tone of the Maha movement, make America healthier. Okay? Again, yeah, in the 60s and 70s, we were a lot healthier, but we had better food back then. It was simple. All these food now, if food has all these ingredients, and a lot of them you can't even pronounce, and I'm a physician, and some of them I can't pronounce, then you got to think about that. You're putting it into your body. What do you think it's going to do? What do you think your body's going to do? And the immune system has been amazing, because it's evolved with all of these chemicals, and then environment and pollution and all this other stuff that's in our water and our food. And it's evolved to protect us. But I also think that people want a pill to fix themselves. And that's just not the case. It's not going to happen. People need to get off their asses and do some type of exercise, something. You can start with walking. Walking, there are people that say, I'm talking about physicians and even biohackers and even people that are very healthy-minded people. Walking is our superhuman trait. If you just walk, you'd be surprised how much better it can do for you. And a little bit of walking gets you to feeling a little bit better, and then maybe you just don't drink as much Coca-Cola, or maybe you don't, eat that candy or eat those chips. We have to kind of take responsibility for our own actions as individuals, and we can't blame our administration, whether you're a Democrat or you're a Republican. You definitely shouldn't have your political views in there, but you can't blame these people for trying to make somewhat of a change, and I get that. I may not agree with them, but at least they're trying. I'm not running for Congress or anything like that, unless y'all want me to. No, I'm just joking.
Did you hear about they're actually now going to hold people accountable to plane seats? You can only get one plane seat per person. If you need two, you have to purchase 2 tickets.
Yeah, no, and I get it. You see, during COVID, you saw these memes, which they're mean memes. They were, where you have this overweight person driving a scooter, but yet they have the audacity to talk to a healthy person that's not wearing a mask. Okay, just think about that picture. I don't agree with that. I know things happen, and people. It doesn't cost anything to get out in the sunshine and do some type of exercise. Rather, you're sitting watching TV inside your house, drinking a Coke. Not good for you. Not good for you. People need to take accountability for their own actions, and they need to do as much as they possibly can to stay as healthy as they possibly can. And I think people are getting better. I think the younger, now, even 15 years ago or something of that amount of time, that the amount of people utilizing alcohol was 67%, and now it's down to like 41, 42%, especially when you're talking about age ranges from, 18 to 30 years of age. And that's probably a good thing, because although I like alcohol, it's not good for you. And you have all these studies say, drinking 1 beer a day is actually good for you, or drinking 1 glass of wine a day. And maybe
more than 2 or 3 is like bad for you.
Yeah. 1 may be good, but 2 is bad for you. And if you're doing it every day, then
the bar is like super low when it comes to alcohol. It's like,
the bottom line is it good for you? Probably not. No, it's really not. In a lot of different ways, what it does to your metabolism,
also
what it
those
does
studies,
to your sleep, what it does to anything.
Also, you don't know who paid for those studies, right? Like they could be.
And I'm one of them. I mean, unfortunately, with the advent of social media, everybody believes in these conspiracy theories. We've always thought about them, and back then we only had the TV and radio, and then when you had the computers, but you still didn't have social media. Now everything can be reported at the exact same time, and sometimes you see things, but now you have AI. I don't know what I'm looking at. Am I looking
AI, they said that like 60% of the data now that they're seeing pulled from ChatGPT actually comes from Reddit. That's what they said. I don't know if that's accurate or confirmed.
And so I don't know what is real or what is not. I mean, you have to. All I can tell you is what's real is with the patient that's in front of me that has the issues that they have.
What's real is like the stuff that we already have known, like the food pyramid and the like running or walking and being outside, like basic healthy things.
Basic
common
things.
Sense should be what's real.
Yeah,
really.
But I go back to accountability, and I think that we try to put the blame on, the politicians and all these other people, and I do it too for certain things, but I need to get out and work out. I need to take control of my own health to put me in a position where I'm as healthy as I possibly can be. Look, things happen. People get cancers. People get different ailments. I was looking at the documentary about Bruce Willis having the FTD, which is a frontotemporal dementia. It's not Alzheimer's. It's a form of Alzheimer's, but it's not Alzheimer's. He doesn't even know that he's sick, but he's progressively getting worse and worse. And eventually these type of people, they just kind of stop breathing. Their bodies or their brains just don't
forget how to
They forget how to do that, and it is a sad evaluation of a man that, I loved watching his movies. I loved seeing how, all the things, crazy stuff that he would do and how happy he was. He was such a happy guy. And now he's just not that. He's just not emotional about anything. For anything. And when you think about that, and then they become aphasic where you just can't. I mean, I think he's able to talk a little bit at times now, but it's progressively getting worse and worse. That's important to kind of think about that. Things like that happen, and there's no fault to anybody. There's no blame. It just happens, and it just sucks, But I think that you have to take accountability for your own health and do as much as you possibly can to stay as healthy as you possibly can.
Seems to be recurring Dr.G theme is take control of your own health.
This is the thing. That's why I've gotten into this regenerative medicine, because I still believe, and I go back to this all the time, I think your immune system is the key to everything. And I believe regenerative medicine with stem cells and PRP, PRF, all these different things that we have within our bodies are what's going to help us fight off any ailments, especially as we age. And then getting good old-fashioned sunlight, getting good old-fashioned whole foods, doing this time, trying to get the cleanest water you possibly can, because some of the things you have to do to make that water even more clean than what we get out of the faucet, and people kind of do what they have to be as healthy as they possibly can. I just think that people need to eat, go back into that. These vaccines, they're important. Got to have them in some form. Are the mandates fair?
How often do we need to be taking these vaccines, though? Aren't they?
Now, the vaccines definitely, as children, I think need to be. I'm talking about RFK. He can't take that away from a lot of people, and I think certain mandates, certain vaccines. That's when I'm thinking, those have been tried and true for decades.
Those should be
you probably need to continue
required,
those. Yeah. The COVID vaccine. That's a very controversial thing, and I don't know. I haven't taken it. Do I want to take it? No, I don't think I need to take it. But there's something else is going to come out. I don't know what it is, and I hope that it's a natural virus that comes out, and it's not a virus that people made and it got loose, and it's evolved. Everything evolves. We go back to movies. You and I, when we talk a lot about different movies and stuff like that. What happened with the dinosaurs in Jurassic Park? They merged their genetic structure with a frog that could sexually was a female and male, and so they could replicate.
Yeah, the life finds a way.
Yeah, it finds a way. These animals evolved. I do think that stuff. We think we can control them. We can't control anything. The universe is going to happen the way it's going to happen, and that's just how it is. You can make the best possible, hopefully educated evaluation of it and hope that things go in your favor. I think positivity is a huge thing, and everybody's all negative. And I think you put negative feelings out there, you're going to get negative back. There's been studies that's shown, yelling at plants and calling them bad names versus sending nice, calm music and saying sweet things. The one that you said bad things to dies, and the one that you said good things to lives and flourishes. And so I think everything's about energy, and so I think the treatments that are slowly coming out with pulsed electromagnetic frequencies and sound therapies and light photobiomodulation type
we should
therapies.
definitely talk about that too.
It's very important, and we've touched upon it in different episodes. But
we should go to like a specifics of each kind.
Yeah, we can. I think that's an important thing, and we'll do that just because people need to understand it. And this stuff is not super expensive. Now, insurance will not pay for any of this stuff. I mean, it may pay for some in some regards if you word it differently, but for the most part, it's not gonna be paid for by insurance. But then again, people shouldn't depend on insurance. They should do this as much as they possibly can. And I know this is I don't make that much money. Everybody has time. If you have time to sit down and watch Love Island and all the Real Housewives and all this stupid reality shows, you definitely have time to either work out or at least educate yourself well enough to eat better, or maybe just not eat as much. That's why, we talked about the GLPs. And at first I didn't think they were good. I think they were good for morbidly obese and diabetics. But now I think using them in the right doses, mainly micro doses, I think they can do some really cool things because it gets people that are quite heavy to no fault of their own. Maybe they have some type of genetic issue, or maybe they have some metabolism issue that they, have gained a lot of weight. These people are losing weight. And when they lose weight, they're happier and they're doing more things. They're eating less, which is good because a lot of the food they eat, either because they can't afford it or because they just were weak, they were eating this processed food. Now they're eating less of that. And hopefully they're kind of switching over to more health conscious type foods and whole foods. That part's great, And so, I think all this stuff is really good. And I think vaccines are important. I think that things need to be mandated in some form, but also things need to be questioned in others. And I don't think that people should be fired, should be dishonorably discharged. They should be negatively affected if they don't feel comfortable with a particular thing, unless it is something that truly is safeguarded for the entire good. Because I don't know about that with COVID, and it sucks because there's a lot of good people that died, and maybe they could have been saved. But I also think that sticking them in a room and not allowing them to get sunlight, not allowing them to at least die or be with their loved ones.
There's also a lot of depression that probably contributed to being more sick.
And I go back to, if you're thinking negative thoughts and you're getting, negative things are going to keep going and happening. And we need to make a push of being more positive. But guess what? What news do you want to hear? If they're talking about a happy time, people found their lost dog, that's great. People, did all these great things. Nobody pays attention. But wait, there's a school shooting, everybody pays attention. Wait, there's a big fire, everybody pays attention. It's all the negative things. And I'm not saying that those are things that we need to focus on, and because those are important. You got to know, especially if there's a fire. But the fact of the matter is it's everything negative. And I don't. Is there an answer to it? Who knows? I don't have an answer. I just think that the more positive we can be, and trust me, I'm a pessimistic guy at times, but as I age, I feel as though we have to be as positive as we possibly can be, because if we don't, we're only spiraling into a negative kind of conundrum that's going to lead us into a place that we don't want to be. So what we covered in this episode of Late Nights with Dr.G is the Senate hearings and the deposing of RFK Jr. Okay, everything was probably based more so on any issues with the vaccines. Should we mandate them? I don't know the answer to that. I know that he fired the 17-member committee and hired people or appointed people that kind of thought like he thought or thinks. I don't know if that's right. This episode kind of focused on that. What is right for vaccines? I can't give you an answer. I think as a clinician, I think you need a lot of good evidence-based type studies that show us it is good, and some of them do show. And so I do think some vaccines have to be mandated, especially when you're talking about school children. I don't think so, but once again, that's my opinion on that. But I do think that he's trying to make us have a discussion on not staying with the status quo and really trying to figure out how we feel about having a government tell us what we can and cannot do with our health. It's an important concept, and everybody has to think about that. And like I've said in previous episodes, you got to take responsibility for your own health, and you got to do the right things that's going to make you as healthy as you possibly can be.